So all the things that made me a really good gymnast kind of fueled this disorder that almost took my life. I was
Wow.
hospitalized for an eating disorder my senior year in high school, about 18 months after leaving the sport. Those few months of really intensive therapy saved my life.
Let's talk about your professional career.
Yeah.
How did you find it was your thing at the beginning?
Yeah. Good question.
When the final whistle blows or the lights go down, many of athletes, ask themselves who I am without my sport. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about when did you feel realize you had to find a new identity beyond being an athlete?
Well, to answer that question, I need to give you, I want to go back in my story. My time in sport, my sport was gymnastics. I started the sport at age 4, and it very quickly, like gymnastics became all I did. I actually didn't do any other sports growing up. Gymnastics was it. And my time in that sport came to an end when I was 17. So I'm 37 today. So 2 decades later. And I think going, if I reflect on it now, really, I couldn't have said the words. I probably didn't have the words to say, as an athlete looking for my identity beyond the sport. That's what it was. Like in hindsight, I think I just, I struggled with where I fit in. I struggled with how does the traits that made me good at my sport, intensity, hard work, discipline, like how does that translate into social environments, or other environments that I'm now a part of because I'm not in the gym for 40 hours a week, where my entire, that was my community, my friends, everything was in this one place. And so, for me, realizing I don't know that there was a single moment where I was like, oh shoot, I need to figure out who I am without this sport. It just, it happened through a lot of trial and error, life over the last 20 years. But I think, and it's that journey, like how long it took me to find that and put all those pieces together is largely the reason behind this mission. I think there's more words today for athletes. More people are talking about life after sport, than they did 20 years ago. Like it wasn't something people talked about. It felt really isolating. And so, yeah, it's largely the reason behind the Athlete Identity Project is to help athletes find those words sooner and then realize like that the journey isn't straightforward and it's not necessarily easy, but it's worth it. And that, they will find success and fulfillment beyond their playing days.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it was the same when I left my sport. I felt like identity wasn't a thing. I was looking for what is next, my
Mm-hmm.
next steps and everything. And also on my time, like 5 years ago, it wasn't a thing. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Europe and I don't like, hope, I think it's the same like level of awareness about mental health in sports. So on that time, it wasn't a thing. And, uh, in my case, talking to a sports psychologist or something like this, it means that you had a problem, you know,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like a thing to talk just to be like find answers without feeling like I'm completely lost.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely understand and resonate about this, and I'm so excited about this kind of awareness right now about this mental health, and not only with the athlete journey, in terms of also after sports. I feel really grateful about this, and that's why I decided to create this project, to create even more awareness and hopefully
Yeah.
help someone.
Yeah.
So
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So before we dive into the present moment where you are right now,
yeah,
can you
yeah,
share a bit about your early life and what first drew you to sports, specifically in
yeah,
gymnastics?
yeah. I am, like I said, I started when I was 4. I think, like going back to the really early days, I think my mom put me in dance because that's just, a natural thing for a little girl to try. And um, the only part of the dance class that I really enjoyed was the tumbling at the end. And so they were like, "Hey, she should try gymnastics." And I mean, that was really the beginning of the end for me. Like I said, I loved it. I so many early years in the sport, you find kind of I had a natural talent for it. Um, had early success, like loved being in the gym, loved summer camps, loved everything that came with the sport of gymnastics, and progressed relatively quickly. Gymnastics is a sport, especially 20 years ago, where, the Olympians were 15, 16, 17 years old. And so, your time to really reach that peak was extremely condensed. I think I love how the sport is evolving now. I mean, Simone Biles, Ali Raisman have done a ton to change the trajectory of that, and they're in their late 20s and really thriving in the sport. And I think that's, I it's amazing evolution for the sport of gymnastics. But that wasn't the era I grew up in, and so it gets really intense really fast. Um, by the time I was 12, it was 20 hours a week in the gym. Um, by the time I was 15, it was 30 hours a week in the gym, homeschooled. And, it really was all I had time for. And the community that I fit in. And, my story is uh, those last few years in the sport for me. I had my first big injury when I was 14 years old, a bilateral elbow dislocation. So both my arms at the same time. Um, Traumatic, for just being a 14-year-old. And as I reflect on that and have had the opportunity to reflect on that as an adult, just, you know, reliving that, thinking like, man, I was a child, right? Like going through this massive injury and coming back, like there was no question in my mind I was not going to come back from that. And I had, but then struggled with mental health following that. So I struggled with fear and PTSD and worked with a psychologist, like, processing the trauma of that injury, and never really made it back to where I was before. Um, and then ultimately, I had another injury that kind of was the beginning of the end for my time in sport. I fractured my lower back, compression fracture when I was, I don't know, the ages run together, 16 or, and I still came back after that, which is crazy. I had
Wow.
another successful season. And then ultimately decided that my time in, like, I was done competing in gymnastics. And, you know, the summer after I made that decision, I, like, again, like you said, like I didn't know I was searching for life without gymnastics. It's like I was doing the best I could with the tools and the words that I have. I started going to the fitness center. I was still coaching in the sport. I, was doing all of these things that felt like the right things, but there was, the motivation behind it was, I don't want to say it was wrong. It's just where I was at, but the motivation behind it was to still be a gymnast, right? To still, gymnastics made me special. It made me unique. It's, something that made me stand out. And without it, I was searching for other ways to be different. And that ultimately manifested in an eating disorder for me, and an eating disorder that was really a disease of perfectionism, not a disease around food. It was driven by being the hardest worker in the room, driven by being the most disciplined person. Um, So all the things that made me a really good gymnast, kind of fueled this disorder that almost took my life. I was
Wow.
hospitalized for an eating disorder my senior year in high school, about 18 months after leaving the sport of gymnastics. And, um, that time, those few months of really intensive therapy saved my life and gave me basic tools to move forward in the world. I went to college and I ran in the opposite direction of sport. And studied engineering, had a 15-year career in management consulting, and really couldn't reckon with my time in gymnastics until recently. Um, and have been able to go back to that time and revisit it and do a lot of healing and realize all of the things that gymnastics gave me that have made me successful, in the long run, both in career and other aspects of my life. But yeah, maybe that was more than you asked for, but that's
That's
that
all
was my
good.
kind of gymnastics story and some of the early innings of it that really fuel what I'm doing now.
Wow. It's crazy because at the beginning, when I left my sport, I thought all my journey, it was specifically like I was dealing with this kind of problems, but I thought I was the like unique for me and no one
Mm-hmm.
else was dealing with this. And as I'm talking with athletes and everything, it's crazy because it's the same patterns all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I mean, your journey, it's been, I acknowledge you for that to overcome everything
Thank
you've
you.
been through. It's really like honorable. And I want to touch about your injuries. How,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't like deal with very big injuries. And even these small injuries got me like really, really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So how your big injury, your first big injury, how did you like felt and how kind of made you see this injury in a different ways and how you
Yeah.
came back?
Yeah. Um, Again, I have more words for it today than I did 20 years ago. I think in the early days of the injury, I mean, that it was a fall from the uneven bars. And like I said, it was both elbows. One required kind of, reconstructive surgery to pin all the pieces back together. But, in the early days, it was a year-long recovery. And in the early days, it was, I would say depressed, like depressed is the word I was used. And had I, had access, had we known, um, had that been those resources been more readily available at the time, like that would have probably been a real diagnosis for me. Because, and again, I went from being every minute of the day
Yeah.
accounted for, right, to really unable to do anything for myself. Like I couldn't feed myself, I couldn't wash my hair, I couldn't do anything. And not only just being a 14-year-old girl, like traumatic in
Yeah.
itself, like this like dichotomy between having defining productivity one way and then having that stripped um was really challenging. And I know I spent a lot of time just kind of crying, like I mean just crying on our couch at home. And um you know I my coach at the time, and she's a lifelong coach, she was my coach since I was 4 years old and really saw me through all of my career in gymnastics. She sent a card and she said just focus on a longer walk each day. And so in the early innings, that's like what it was. Like I didn't know if I'd go back. I wasn't even really thinking about it. It was just like, okay, longer walk each day, like 1%. Like I can do that, be better. And um, And as I got physically stronger and my arms started to heal, like there really wasn't a question of if I would go back.
Okay.
My parents, yeah, my parents weren't, my dad was a high school athlete, a good athlete, but they weren't really high level athletes in their time. And they begged me to leave the sport after having to like go through that. Like, and there was no question. And so it just became, okay, that's the new goal. Like the new goal is to get back into competing shape and to do this again. And yeah, I think that's the power of the athlete mindset is, at least for me, when I lock into something that I'm going to go do, it's like,
Yeah.
look out. Like,
Yeah.
and my parents kind of learned that. Like, they just learned, okay, she's decided. So, like, let's just, support her and make it as healthy of an environment as we can. Um, and so, yeah, like it's all I knew how to do. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's a goal. I can work towards it. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It's like you're able to throw yourself into that. Which is, it's beautiful. It's powerful. It's dangerous if not applied in the right direction. But for me at that time, like, yeah, there wasn't a question. So,
Yeah. I mean, you said something really, really powerful about how you dealt with your injury is focusing on the next little step. So
mhm.
reflecting on my injuries, I was focusing all the time with the worst case scenario. I cannot come back. I cannot do anything right now. I need to train. I need to do these things. And I wish I had this advice, like focus on how you can do right now in order to like improve a little bit for
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's
I
a really
think,
good. Yeah.
and again, I like looking back at my story, I had such the benefit of not having social media in
Yeah.
in the early 2000s. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't looking at everyone doing the sport every day. I wasn't watching everyone just get incrementally better while I was sitting on the couch. Like I didn't it was hard enough and I didn't have that, those external forces,
Mhm.
kind of like making me feel worse about my current position, which in hindsight was such a gift. It's like, no, my bubble was so small and it was just, yeah, longer walk each day. I can do that, right? And I think it's so much more challenging in the day and age of social media
Yeah.
because you do see what isn't real life. It's my personal opinion, like
Yeah.
the highlight reel of,
Mhm.
of everyone else, and it makes it really tough.
Yeah. One of the things I 2 years ago I've learned about social media is a reflection of your life. For example, the people say all the time, who you surround with in real life will determine who you become. So
Hmm.
I aimed social media this way. I only follow people that like benefit me. And for example, if I was dealing with an injury, this is like a scenario I'm creating right now because when I was injured, I was social media. It was a thing, but in my case, I was still young, and I wasn't like getting like too obsessed in social media. It wasn't a thing in my age. Um, but what I will do is like, mute all the people that is related from sports, or
Great
just,
advice.
yeah, just close social media for the time you are, dealing with the injury, and this will help a lot. Yeah, I
I mean,
think.
I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole. I think that's a healthy behavior, whether you're an injury, whether you're trying to
Mhm.
find who you are without sport. Just like remember that it is a curated version of reality, what you're
Yeah,
seeing, and
yeah,
sometimes just turning it off is the best thing you can do for yourself. And it's a part of the reason why, and I know, we'll get to some of the things I've been working on. But one of the things is a memoir and telling not only my journey in sport, which is unique. It's, there's ups and downs, like it's relatively dramatic. I gave you the highlight version, right? Like there's things to learn from that. But really the entire part two of the book is like this winding journey of life after sport. Um, and it's not as dramatic and it's not as interesting and it's not as fast. And like as I've been like writing, I constantly think like who wants to read this? But I keep writing it and who knows, maybe it will get published, maybe it won't. But it's like that's real life. Like
Yeah.
real life isn't dramatic and it isn't, and it's like it's backtracking and making a bad decision and like having to backtrack that and it's like years of just monotonous, steady progress, which as an athlete feels like failure. And it felt like failure to me at times. And so like that is a part of, you know, what my mission is to be like wherever you're at in your journey, life in sport, life out of sport, like life is slow and messy and full
Yeah.
of ups and downs, and it's not a curated highlight reel, and that's okay, and that's beautiful, and you're going to find fulfillment in it. And so um yeah, who knows if that part two sees the light of day, but like the message is the same. It's like wherever you're at, you're where you need to be and your journey. And so yeah.
Yeah. What I feel is like why athletes struggle after sports is because we were trained like it's black or white and you have to do this, otherwise you will not reach what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
So when you transition into life, you go with the same mindset, and when one thing you are pursuing doesn't work, it's when the rock bottom hits, because
Yeah.
you thought, okay, so I had to do this because I want to do this, but doing this I didn't achieve it, or I achieved it and it wasn't what I thought.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing I dealt with the most, and I think most of athletes relate to that, and probably you too. So
Yeah, I get it.
yeah, let's transition a little bit about
Yeah.
your life after sports.
Sure.
So why did you get into CrossFit? Like it was special or for you, or how
Yeah.
did you get in?
uh it wasn't super intentional, which is kind of a theme. I didn't find CrossFit until about 5 years after I left gymnastics. So I went to the University of Arkansas, and there's a whole bunch about that chapter of just like unwinding myself and unwinding this view of perfectionism. College taught me so much about that.
Yeah.
Um, but I actually found CrossFit because my student ID was deactivated in our
Oh,
university fitness center, like in our fitness centers, right? Because I had graduated. And so I was looking for just local gyms in the area where I was, in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I was going to be starting my first job. And my brother, who happened to be in AmeriCorps at the time in California, he's like, hey, I started, this is the old days of CrossFit. So this is 2010, 2011, where they would post the workout of the day on the main site, right, for free. They still do that, but like it was people would follow the main site. And he's like, I started doing this workout, and it's like I feel like I'm gonna die every day, and you would love it. And so I like just found a local gym, and again, back CrossFit kind of in that era, it was like it was in a warehouse. It was in this like really random back alley, and I walk in, and um, I it kind of felt like home right away, right? It smelled like a gym, which is where I grew up. The rubber mats, the sweat, the chalk, the dirt, like the filth. And yeah, I mean, it's, I think CrossFit is a thing you either love or you hate. And your first workout, I thought I was fit, like I was running marathons kind of at the time. And I got my butt kicked.
yeah.
And and that was kind of it for me. I mean, I had no idea where it would lead. But I loved the space and the environment it created. It allowed me to bring out this intensity that I kind of learned to hide. And a part of my story, both just in kind of becoming who I am today, is like I'm an intense person. I think gymnastics and just high level sport in general, like you pursue things with an intensity that others don't. Um, and, in many aspects of life and social environments, even sometimes in professional environments, like people think that's weird. And so, but CrossFit
Yeah,
was this environment where I could, like go hard and
yeah,
um, kind of show that side of myself. And yeah, I was hooked in those very early days. And I didn't start competing till a little after that because I was in hindsight, so really underfueled and struggling with recovery and my eating disorder. Um, CrossFit gave me a lot of those nutrition tools and a community that celebrated strength and in many ways gave me a place to heal, um, to really heal. And so, yeah, that's how I found CrossFit a little bit by accident. But
okay.
it stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, I can resonate with my story. After my roller hockey career ended, I was drawn to bodybuilding. And the reason it was because uh, bodybuilding was different than going into a conventional gym. I hate like Fitness Planet or some like general fitness facilities. What I love, and that's why I love being here in the United States, is because they are unique bodybuilding gyms that you go in and you feel like, oh, this gym is like make me feel at home, make me feel
Hmm.
like we're surrounded by athletes and like this discipline and this strong. That's what I really love about bodybuilding. Um, I'm curious because in my case, after I left my sport, I told myself to not compete anymore. And you competed again with CrossFit.
Hmm.
What like what was your process about why you wanted to compete again? Or because in my case I was so burnt out to compete,
Yeah.
and I would love to know your journey about this.
Yeah, I think my journey is unique in that. I mean, as part of this project, I've talked to a lot of athletes, similar to yourself, that have successful collegiate careers or professional careers, and they feel that way when they get to the end of those, that era, that chapter of their life, like they're toast. Like you're burnout, you're tired. Um, many of them say like, I don't ever want to exercise again, which of course isn't the reality. People find their way back to it. My story was different. I left for reasons that I weren't necessarily that.
Okay, yeah, I
In
see.
many ways, it felt like, my competitive career was it ended early. Um, and so yeah, I didn't necessarily feel when I left my time in the sport completely just burn out from competition.
Okay.
And I didn't start CrossFit for the competition. That really didn't come into play until a few years, like into doing the
Mm-hmm.
sport. Um, but it was different from the beginning though. And I think different in the way that I was doing it for myself. And not that I wasn't doing gymnastics for myself. But there does become a point, at least for me, when I was doing sport as an adolescent, where it kind of just felt like I was doing it because that's what I did, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't this active decision of like, man, I really, I'd still use the word love. Like I think as athletes, we all say we love our sport. And I think that's true. But with CrossFit, it was different. It was like, no, I'm choosing to be a part of this community and I'm actively choosing to be part of this sport. And I know that I can step away from it and not lose myself because I at this time had already spent 5 or 6 years wandering, if you will, before I found it. So like CrossFit and competing in CrossFit was just a totally different experience for me. And like, I competed for from 2013 and then went to the CrossFit Games in 2016 and competed a last time at regionals in 17. And after that regionals in 17, I was like, man, my heart's just not here anymore. I love this sport, but like my heart's not here. And that was it.
Wow.
And I still do CrossFit. I still believe in that methodology. I've, since had 3 kids, and so it looks a lot different than it did when I was competing at the highest level. But like I was able to step away from what was intense competition and intense training because if you want to be good at anything, that's just what it involves. And I was okay, and it wasn't destructive the second time around. Um, which leads me to believe it doesn't have to be destructive the first time around either. And so, like, that's a part of what I'm doing is trying to pull, okay, what made that experience different? Like, what did I have then that still allowed me to compete at a really high level, but also not let it consume how I viewed myself and my self worth and my identity and all of those things. It was just a piece of me, not all of me, which gymnastics was all of me. And so, yeah, CrossFit, gave me the opportunity to kind of be revived as an athlete and then to decide when I was done. And um,
Yeah, that's you said that a thing that stuck me right now. It was like, so at the beginning, you kind of didn't choose consciously gymnastics, and you did it because you were doing it,
mm,
and I really resonated with that because my dad played roller hockey, and he told me, oh, you can join. I really was enjoying it, but it wasn't like a conscious choice. And after I left, I realized that, yeah, you're right. Like when you leave this sport that you were doing all the time, you can consciously choose what your next like sport
mhm,
is. So that was really good. And also for those people that just retired from sports and are watching this, man, your best days are coming because you can choose your own path right now. So
yeah,
that is
you
exciting.
can. And it doesn't have to be, I would say I am done with competition now. Like um, having, had that second opportunity, that second chance in CrossFit, I'm done competing, but I still find so much fulfillment in giving myself an hour a day to
Yeah,
take care of myself, to build strength. And, I don't hit lifetime maxes, but I still feel like I could hang with like, some good athletes and that's just a part of our life. And so even if, you are a former athlete watching this and you do feel burnout from competition, like your best days don't have to be in sport,
yeah,
right? Like there's so many other avenues. I know we're going to talk a little bit
yeah,
about my professional career. Like there's so many other avenues to take what sport has given you and go, like there's mountains to climb all over the place. Figuratively, literally, like whatever you want to do. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, revival to some
yeah,
to some podium or to some athletic endeavor. I think that was also a part of what I had to unlearn was I only like anything that wasn't, I only saw hard work in terms of physical,
yeah,
like physical workouts. Like if it
yeah,
wasn't like this, like physically, you know, draining exercise, like it wasn't hard work and it wasn't
yeah,
enough. And
yeah,
so it's like been learning that, like, no, like there's so many avenues and it doesn't have to be crushing yourself in the gym to find success and find fulfillment. And so yeah, I wherever you're at in that journey, just know that I agree with you. Like your best days can be ahead of you. Um, and I, yeah, I believe they are. So,
Yeah. I want to touch one thing that I think personally I didn't experience too much, but you experienced a lot and was a big struggle for you after sports. And I know a lot of athletes relate to that is your eating disorders. How
mhm.
was your journey in terms of that? Because I know a lot of people deal with that after sports.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, it was, it's a lot. I mean, I think again, like this is a story that I put in a box for 20 years. When people would ask me like, "Hey, what's your background in athletics?" The narrative was I was a gymnast. Injury took me out of the sport. True, very true. Not, but not fully, not fully accurate. I think my, the thing I would say with anyone struggling with um, disordered eating or even just being uncomfortable in their body that is now changing beyond sport is um, you don't have to live with the chains of that disorder forever. There was, for me, um, again, for me, it was less about the food and less about the body image. It was more about perfection and discipline. Like it was a disease of perfection for me, and that's just how it happened to manifest. Um, but when I did hit like my own rock bottom, um, which happened to coincide, and we won't go too far into it, with my senior year in high school. Hurricane Katrina hit my hometown. So it was a category 5, and I mean, it destroyed everything around me, but it destabilized this kind of really fragile ecosystem I'd built around food. Like,
Okay.
there were certain foods I would eat, I wouldn't eat, and those foods just weren't available. Like there weren't grocery stores to go to. And
Yeah.
so for me, that was kind of really the rock bottom where I finally got to a place where I said, "Hey, I want to get better. I don't want to live this way anymore." And look, that journey took a long time, and it did for me involve 3 months in an inpatient facility, or 2 months in an inpatient facility, 1 month outpatient with that facility, which even the term like hospitalization when it comes to the context of mental health, like it's still taboo. Like even in today's day and age, right? It's
Yeah.
still taboo. I think, I felt fear and shame going into that. But you know, on the other side of a long time to heal from this, it's like something I am sharing openly because it really did save my life. And I needed that kind of intensive therapy in a really safe environment to overcome where I was at. And when I left, the facility was Ridgeview Women's Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I left that, I wasn't, I was no way healed. Like that took a lot of time, and just figuring out how to be healthy and comfortable in my body and space. But it gave me tools to be stable, and to move on with life. And CrossFit, I wouldn't say CrossFit saved me, but just the environment that celebrated strength and community. And that, I mean, I kind of needed to be strong to be able to move the weight I wanted to move. And so it just put it in a different context. It was the first time anyone had talked to me about nutrition in a way that was about getting stronger, not smaller. um and that was an unlock for me in so many ways. And today I mean, my journey with nutrition since, competing at the top, like I've tracked macros, I've done pretty much everything out there you
Yeah.
can think, and experimented. But, today I do live free from the chains of my eating disorder. And I've, had 2 healthy pregnancies, and which is a lot for a woman, you know, even as a woman athlete who's used to looking and moving a certain way. And, but again, I think for me today, I have routines around, I do take an hour for myself each day, and I just feel healthy and strong. And we eat whole foods and do things that fuel our bodies. And, um, so yeah, it hasn't been, you know, I wouldn't say it was the most pleasant of journeys,
Yeah.
but I think it was worth it. Like all of the therapy, the work, the ups and the downs, like it was worth it to be where I'm at today. And I never in my life when I was in that stage of life, I couldn't see a life without my eating disorder. Um, and so for those that may be struggling with it, I think that's my message is you can have a life without your eating disorder. That does exist and it's worth anything
Nice.
it takes to get there.
Can you share like some small tips that they talk to you about how you can like overcome this eating disorder? What are the steps you made to help you to overcome step by step this eating
Yeah.
disorder?
I mean, I think the first thing I had to realize was it wasn't about the food, and it had to, at least for me, and I would say most, eating disorders are a mental health disorder, just like depression, just like other anxiety, just like other mental health disorders. They just manifest in, a control of food and our environment around food, and so a lot of what, the intensive work I did at Ridgeview was unwinding this view that I needed to be perfect. Um, and again, gymnastics is a sport of perfection, right? Like the
Yeah,
perfect 10, like that's what
yeah,
makes the sport well known and famous. And so for me, it was, yeah, a lot of unwinding my own expectations of perfection, but also the expectations I thought others had of me to be perfect.
okay,
And that took, that didn't just happen in 2 months. Like that took
yeah,
years of realizing like I remember the first B I got. Not just like in college, not just like for the semester, my first B ever. It was in college, Cal 2, really hard. Um and I wasn't, it was just like this reckoning of like, oh wow, like no one cares,
yeah,
And like I didn't crumble, the world didn't stop, like nothing happened, right? When I wasn't perfect. And so it was like little moments like that over the course of time, but I think it really was deep work around perfectionism for me that helped me. And then, the things for me, the things that helped from just a pure food perspective is understanding the science of nutrition. Like
mm,
how does fuel food actually fuel my body? And how do we metabolize it? And what kinds of, just like not just the basic, here's how to read
yeah, yeah,
like a nutrition label, but like here's how it's allowing me to do the things I want to do
yeah,
first through be a CrossFit, right? Like, okay, if I want to build muscle and I want to move these weights, like these are the things that this is how scientifically and biologically that happens. But then even also in my professional career, like, I think our brain is 2% or overall body mass, but consumes 25 to 30% of its energy, right? Like
yeah,
even just the ability to use like cognitively drive and problem solve, like it's all related to nutrition. um and I didn't have that, we didn't have those resources when I was growing up to understand that, and that has really helped me as just, I'm an engineer, so I'm pretty black and white, like scientific, and so that really resonated with me of like this is just science and biology, and it's less emotional. And so that detachment from food being something that was emotionally driven to food being something that is just a part of functioning was also really helpful in kind of educating myself. And one of the reasons I start grad school today, like that's the other big update. But
Oh, wow.
yep, in applied kinesiology and physiology to really go deep in some of these scientific things and be able to simplify them for all audiences. Because again, for me, that was an unlock of understanding, really understanding how it works to help me achieve my goals, whatever those were.
Yeah. I really like in my journey, I didn't suffer with eating disorder because I was lucky to choose a sport that was required to understand that 70-80% of your results is food. So
Hmm.
in my case, I was like, okay, I need to understand how to fuel my body to achieve certain physical goals.
Hmm.
What I dealt with the most was that obsessiveness about being lean, grow muscle and be super lean, and be like weight every like every food and be so obsessed with the quantities and everything. So that was the hardest part for me.
Yeah,
Just for 1 year ago, I just started to be more flexible and don't weight the food almost everything. So it
yeah,
was the big thing for me. But
yeah,
I was pretty lucky about choosing a sport that required, I skipped all the things like that, you know, have these like big issues about eating disorders. So
yeah. I mean, I would say all sports, like 70 to 80% is fuel.
yeah,
What based on like what we know about, now know about the human body and human performance, um it's untapped, I mean, potential for athletes of any age to understand how, nutrition and food increase your performance. And I do think, I think now living a more balanced, flexible, I don't weigh or track macros like or anything like that. I make rainbow pancakes for my kids on Saturday mornings. Like, it's a deep breath, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
but I think
yeah,
you do have to go, like there is some element of like you have to go to the end, you have to go to the
yeah.
extreme to then be able to back out of it.
There
And
are
so I
different
think again,
stages. Yeah, it's a
yeah, I think
process, Lane.
it's a process. Yeah.
Yeah, especially nowadays with social media. There's this need of achieving it as fast as possible, the results you want. And you can have the path or the things, but what we have to learn nowadays is to refrain our mindset to it takes time, it takes process, and every person is different. Every journey is different. So that's what I think we have to reinforce the most. Um, so what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think like if there's one message that people take from this, and it's a message that I will continue to share, is you're not behind. You're just on a different journey, right?
Mhm.
And I think in depending on how much of your life you gave to your sport, for me that was when I was 17. For you, you were 22,
24.
24. For a lot of athletes coming out of college, they're a similar age. For professionals, I mean, 28, 30 coming out of the NFL, like you just lived a different life, right?
Yeah,
And but all of the things that, the self-discovery, the bad decisions, all of those things like still have to happen. And so if you're comparing yourself to someone like myself that started that journey when she was 17 and you're starting it when you're 24, like it's an unfair comparison. Like it's
yeah,
not, you shouldn't even be comparison, like, right? And so it's just remembering, yeah, to kind of keep, your eye on the ball, you're stay in your own lane, like all of those,
yeah,
sport things that made you good in sport. Like it's kind of a similar message because, you know, in the end, like life is about the impact we make and it's not about being at a certain place in a certain time.
yeah. Let's talk about your professional career.
Yeah.
How did you find it was your thing at the beginning?
Yeah, good question. So again, this is where, like, when I reflect on my own story, and it's different from some of the athletes that spend longer time in their sport, which don't you don't have time to necessarily fully explore in through your university years, right? But for me, I did, and so I, coming out of high school or growing up in high school, I always thought I would go into university and study exercise science. And just given all that I had been through, it wasn't a safe choice for me at that time. And so I went in undecided. And I was undecided for a really long time. And I tried everything. Like I tried art and I tried um civil engineering and I tried like, so many different classes in the business college. Like, and I ultimately landed in industrial engineering. But it took a lot of, I mean, 2.5 years of searching. And again, one thing that happened in what was a pretty natural time for that exploration, but many people don't have that. And I
Yeah,
think the same message is clear as like, give yourself time
yeah,
to explore and like have grace for that process because it is a process. It's a process of like paying attention to, what motivates you. And for me, it was about environment, like being around people that thought like me, that, had feeling kind of at home, if you will. And then, my professional career wasn't like I didn't set out and like know that I was going to become what I was going to become. Like my first job was a logistics engineer for a transportation company, and it was one of the big employers that recruited out of University of Arkansas because they were local to town. And like honestly, I'm maybe this is bad to say, like I made the decision because I wanted to stay in town with a guy I was dating at the time, like it wasn't like this
yeah,
big strategic decision. And I spent 3 years there and kind of learned the way of working, but ultimately um it wasn't, it still wasn't the right fit for me. And I landed in consulting and with the company, name was Credera, that I ended up spending ten years with, and really where had the bulk of my professional career because I was looking for, you know, um, looking for a company that had similar values to mine. And so looking for a place where people felt liked what they were doing. And I actually found that company on Glassdoor, which is it's kind of a site where people can put reviews at different companies. And it was a company that had the highest employee satisfaction score in
wow,
the area. Um, and yeah, and then it just I wish I could say it was like this grand plan, and it wasn't. I just found an environment I like to be in around people that valued excellence the way I value excellence, that worked hard the way I worked hard, and kind of rode the um, rode the wave of that. And towards the end, I loved what I did in my professional career. I became a partner. I had the opportunity to run one of our big offices. I learned to lead, I think, was the biggest thing that my time in consulting took is like, or gave me is, gymnastics being a individual sport. I learned how to lead others and to pour into others and to, you know, um, create this momentum around a vision and help people feel a part of that. And I'm, so grateful for those years. And I also worked, I mean, I got the chance to work with cool clients too. But yeah, that's the other thing is like sometimes you just got to take the first step,
yeah.
right? And pay attention to, is the environment a good environment? Do you feel engaged with the work you're doing? And you may not see 5 years down the road, and that's okay.
Yeah, I want to share like a little bit of my journey about my professional career because I want to like give the audience the contrast about different backgrounds and how
Hmm.
affect like the way you aim all these things. So in my case, I found an influencer in social media who had everything I wanted. He was Spanish. He was living in the United States. He was a personal trainer. Um, he was tattooed, jacked, everything I wanted. And he was millionaire. He had a lot of money. And, I said to myself, I want this. I want exactly this. So I will follow exactly their steps. So I started to get my PT certificate. I traveled to Australia because he did before to go to the United States. He traveled to Australia. I did, and once I found my first personal training job in Australia, I took rock bottom because I achieved the goal what I was looking for, but it wasn't the thing I wasn't fulfilled, and I was expecting feeling this way. So after that, I felt lost because I didn't have direction and I used to have goals and direction. So it was the biggest thing I overcome, if I would say, after sports. So what I did after that is try different things. I was drawn since I left the sports with entrepreneurship and business creation and kind of being leader because I used to have a leader role in my sport. So I was drawn to create my own things, lead people and teach people. So the biggest what I can learn from your story and from my story and from all the athletes I talked about after sports is like you have first to understand what interest you have and try it. So
Hmm.
as you try different things, you can like see what you like, what you don't like, and take the pressure off about this is my thing or I'm lost. It just I want to try this, but it doesn't mean it has to be the thing.
Hmm.
Um, what I felt in my story is like I left the sport and I had to know what exactly I had to become.
Hmm.
And I think even though if you are 30 years old or 24, you have to delete this pressure on yourself. Never is too late to find your way. And what I've learned in my journey is like, it doesn't mean that you love one thing in this stage of your life is going to be the thing that you will do all your life.
Yep.
Life is about the stages and your life is going to change.
Yep.
Your things that you love are going to change. So, and it's okay.
Yeah. I, yeah, I love everything you just said. And I think to build on it, one thing, and I can't even remember the exact time frame um, that I heard it, but I finally connected with the mantra of 1% better each day and was able to kind of, for some reason, that resonated with me at the time, but was able to kind of realize I didn't have to be achieving exponential success every single day. Like, actually,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even if you think about how you define exponential success, but I felt the pressure to be like, I felt pressure to be, and self inflicted, right? Self inflicted pressure
Yeah.
to be high achieving in my career, to be competing at the CrossFit Games, to be, find a spouse and have kids. And I was, like in all of those things. And I think being able to realize, like, no, it's like sometimes, man, sometimes it's okay just to survive the day
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
just show up and to just, and sometimes we need years like that. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we need years where, you know, we just show up for ourselves and for the people around us and we don't drop balls because I think you find most athletes like, hold themselves to a standard of
Yeah.
excellence. And it's like you don't drop balls, you hold your commitments, but you don't necessarily have to be striving in a single direction. And I think that's a lot of what you're saying. And the other thing that, right, we haven't gotten to this part yet, but I made it to partner and then I left and I'm starting over. So I think, the other thing is like you can recreate yourself like however you want, and in whatever, way you want. And yes, we have responsibilities that to our families and to those around us, that, I personally like take a lot of pride in and feel like want to uphold those. But it's like, yeah, it's like, again, life is about trying things and about doing new things, and it's not a single direction, or it doesn't have to be if you don't want
Yeah,
it to be. So
yeah, I totally agree. If I can say the last thing about these topics is I was so scared to fail after sports because luckily I achieved great things in my sport, and I throughout this journey I had this fear about if I don't reach professional level, I will fail myself, I will fail, all the people surrounding me, and I ain't the same way after sports. And it was it was a big thing that kept me stuck,
mm,
um, to try different things because when I learned to and I understood that fail is a part of the process and it's not about you, it's about finding your own way, and failing is when the real knowledge is acquired.
mhm.
It was a game changing for me because I started to try new things without that fear of failing.
Yeah. One, maybe it's a coping mechanism, for that, because I agree with you. Like, I also went through this journey of like realizing, okay, I'm not going to get any better unless I make mistakes like that, especially as you get that. I mean, that's true in sport. And
Yeah,
I think we forget that, right? Like, how many times do you try a skill
yeah,
and fail before you actually master it, right? Like, so, I mean, that's true
yeah,
in sport, it's true in life. Um, One thing I have found really helpful for me to do that, and again, this is my own maybe coping mechanism, and it comes from a lot of the work of Brene Brown, which I'm a huge fan of, around shame. And her whole thing is like, if you throw it on the table, it goes away. And so, like, even in this whole, as I'm navigating what is a pretty large career shift, it's like I talk about it to anyone and everyone that'll listen. And then it's like, yeah, maybe it doesn't work out, maybe it doesn't pan out. But I'm letting people into that journey, and we're human. And I think, that's the other thing that has really helped me is just share it with others, and doesn't have to be in a public platform, or, but
yeah,
find others to like talk about, hey, I'm going to try this and I don't know if it's going to work out, and I'm really scared if it doesn't work out. And like their reaction is going to be like, okay, cool, like, like go do it.
yeah,
And if it doesn't
yeah.
work out, like I'm still going to be your friend or your spouse or like whatever. And so the more you can, get it out of your head, it's, we all deal with it and we all go through it, and finding others to share that experience for me is really helpful in navigating the fear I feel, taking on something new.
Nice, nice. Thank you for sharing that. I want to transition a little bit about your next journey in your professional career, if I would say. You
Yeah.
started this project about the athlete identity project. Why did you start this? And what I understood is like you left your corporate job or like career and transitioned
Mhm.
into to that, if I understand well.
Yeah, that is true. And we could do a whole podcast on, navigating that exit and,
Okay.
kind of coming to that decision. But I did. So I left my role, with Credera as a partner with Credera in November of 2024. So coming up on 5 months ago. And again, like I didn't know that I was going to create the athlete identity project at the time. Um, it was just time for a transition. I have three young children. Like there were a lot of things evolving that made sense for me for that to be, the path I took. And I took, 2 months to, which sounds like a really long time. It went by really fast, but I took, a few months to rest and to kind of just think about what's next, and had many different avenues I could go. Um, but really felt drawn to like give back to the little girl that I was when I was 17, and, have my husband and I kind of work together as to like, okay, I'm gonna, go do this for a little while. And so, yeah, I mean, that the Athletic Identity Project was born, and right now it really is just a project, raising, kind of creating awareness around the transition from athlete, you know, out of elite athletics or high level, and not even high level, just out of athletics in general, and the process that creates, and letting athletes know that they're not alone. And we'll continue to see how that evolves. I wish I could say I knew how it would evolve. I have some ideas on it, but yeah, the mission is to help athletes realize their value is bigger than their sport. And I think that is, I want that mission to be true for athletes who are still competing and for athletes who are done competing. And I think the way that that mission comes to life for each of those unique populations is very different. And it's a part of the reason, I'm going back to grad school to just study it in a little bit, and go deep into some of those high performance, human performance skills to then bring back to each of those audiences. But talking to athletes and starting to connect with local facilities in my area, and yeah, really just raising, again, throwing it on the table, right? Like I go back to
Yeah,
what I said. It's like, this is really hard.
yeah,
Let's talk about it, right?
yeah.
Because you're not doing it, everyone is going through it. So let's just open the space to talk about it. And yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. It's still, it's still in its infancy, and I think will continue to evolve over time. But um,
Yeah, I'm so
I still
excited
work
to
a lot.
see. Yeah,
Yeah,
say
yeah, I
again.
say I still work a lot, but it doesn't feel like work. And
Yeah, yeah, that's the point.
yeah, so
Yeah, I'm so excited to see like your progress about your project. For those of you know, I was interviewed in her project. If you want to see, like, I will link the description, the website. And if you are a former athlete, an athlete that you want to share your story, um, you can bring me like a link to do the questionnaire about how to apply to do like an interview from
yeah,
for your project. And if you want to share your story, she will be happy to share.
yeah, I would love to. It's been really fun to give that back to athletes, and give them a space to celebrate their time in sport. Because that was one thing
Yeah.
I realized I didn't do, right? And I think as athletes, we're kind of wired, okay, move on to the next thing. What's the next
Mhm.
challenge? What's the next? And even just taking a moment to be like, wow, that was like a really, you know, cool accomplishment or a really cool moment. It's been fun to relive those with athletes. And then I think also give them space to share, you know, openly about the challenges of life after sport. And then, give other athletes the opportunity to realize like they're not alone in it. So yeah, I would love to hear stories. I'd love to connect. If you're passionate about a similar mission, you don't have to share your story. I If you go to my Instagram page, you're just going to find pictures of my kids. So I would recommend you not do that. I'm not, I chose to, in many ways, step away from the large forms of social media a few years ago for many of the reasons we've talked about here. But through the website is a great place to to connect with me. I am on LinkedIn also, if you're in that network. But yeah, I would love to,
Yeah, I will
let's
put
share the
all the
mission.
links. I
Yeah,
will put all the links. If anyone want to know about more about your projects and about you. So yeah, I think for today, I want to respect your time. Thank you so much for your time and to share
thank
your
you.
story. And kind of inspire someone. I truly believe that you inspired a lot of people today. And
Thank you.
I acknowledge you for everything you went through. And yeah, going through like life with that new mindset that makes you feel alive and happy and fulfilled. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to talk about it. I could talk about it all day. So,
Yeah,
uh, yeah, I appreciate you.
thank you.